Good morning. I'd like to call this meeting of the House and Senate Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee to order. My name is Martin Causer. I represent the 67th Legislative District in McKean, Potter, and Cameron counties. Happy to be Majority Chairman of the House Committee. And at this time, I'm going to ask the members to introduce themselves, starting with my colleague, Representative Carroll.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Mike Carroll, the House Democratic Chair of the Ag and Rural Affairs Committee from Lackawanna and Luzerne counties in northeastern Pennsylvania.
John Lawrence, Chester and Lancaster counties.
Dave Argel, 29th Senate District, which is Schuylkill and portions of northern and western Berks.
Senator Elder Vogel, Beaver Lawrence County Chairman of the Senate Ag Committee.
Good morning. I'm Judy Schwenk. I'm the Democratic Chair of the Senate Ag and Rural Affairs Committee. I represent the 11th District, which is the heart of Berks County.
Good morning. I'm David Millard. I represent Columbia County.
Representative Russ Diamond, 102nd District from Lebanon County.
Good morning. Marcia Hahn, 138th District, Northampton County.
Good morning. I'm Mindy Fee, and I represent Northern Lancaster County, the 37th District.
Good morning. Representative Dave Zimmerman, representing kind of that eastern part of Lancaster County, Ephrata, New Holland, and the greater area.
Hello, everyone. Representative Dan Mal. I'm from the 91st Legislative District, Adams County.
I'd like to thank all the members for coming today. Our topic today is dairy industry issues and also including House Bill 1265. This is obviously a very important topic. Judging by the number of people we have in the room here, there's a lot of interest. I'm looking forward to the information that is presented today and would like to turn to my colleagues from that also chair the committee for additional comments.
Thank you, Marty. Glad to be here today. Like I said, we are holding this informational hearing today to get the input of other dairy industry as well as the Secretary of Agriculture and a few other people represent the industry as well as Farm Bureau and Penn Ag Industries and people like that to get their input on dairy industry and where they see the dairy industry going and what is taking place right now, why prices and things are the way they are, and hopefully see if they have any crystal ball that can tell us if prices are going to rebound soon. And so we're just glad to have everyone here today. Thank you.
Well said, Senator Vogel and Representative Causer. I'm glad for this opportunity to learn, to get more information. Obviously, some of the legislation being generated from the House. So as a Senate member, it's good to know what is happening and to get more information and to have the opportunity perhaps later to talk with members of the audience to get their sense of the issues too. Thank you.
And thank you as well, Chairman Causer. As many in the room know, there was vigorous debate in the House on this subject, and I suspect that debate will continue and look forward to the input today.
Thank you very much. We have a very aggressive schedule this morning, and we're looking forward to all the information that's presented. So we'll start first with the Honorable Russell Redding, the Secretary of the Department of Agriculture. Secretary Redding, you may proceed.
Mr. Chairman, Chairman Vogel and Senator Schwenk, Representative Carroll, thank you. Appreciate very much the opportunity to be here and certainly an appropriate backdrop to talk about dairy at Ag Progress Days. And I want to thank the committee, all the members, for both your interest in dairy today, but also support of agriculture throughout the year. We've said it many times, particularly in this past year, we certainly couldn't do what we do in the Department of Agriculture without the strong support and leadership of the committee and each of the members. So just a note of thanks to each of you. To all of the dairy producers who are here and gathered, certainly want to take a moment and say thanks to each of you for what you also do in Pennsylvania and Pennsylvania agriculture and the dairy industry. We understand well the sacrifices that are currently being made to stay in the business of agriculture, and particularly the business of dairy. So just know on behalf of the Department of Agriculture to each of the dairy producers, we appreciate very much what you do and look forward to that engagement as well. This is an important issue at any moment. It is particularly important now because we have the overlay of the dry conditions and drought. And what I've heard as I've traveled the state, it's both the immediate issues of dairy pricing and the challenges of the margin or lack thereof at the moment. But it's also the worry of both the current market conditions combined with the current growing conditions. And what that looks like and forecast for the next year makes the dairy discussion even more complicated than what it was. So I just put that on the table that when you talk about dairy issues, it's certainly the price, and we want to talk about 1265 and some of the transparency. But anybody in the business understands that it's complicated. It's complicated in terms of market and the market factors. And then when you overlay some of the challenges of production in the growing season and the seasons of ag, it makes a difficult issue even more difficult. So just to note that this issue is a combination of things. But I do appreciate the opportunity to be here and to talk about dairy. It is worth noting it is the leading sector of the agricultural economy in Pennsylvania, both in terms of its economic value, but the farm level value, as we all know, is only a piece of it. The real value is found in our rural communities, and the value is found in the infrastructure and the businesses that support dairy, and it's also the jobs that come with the dairy industry. And it's an important part of the quality of life in Pennsylvania. I mean, we all, I think, would note that without the 7,400 dairy farms, our landscape would certainly look different, but our communities would feel different. So what we're talking about today both has an economic importance to us, but also that of a quality of life in our community. I note you have some experts on the panel here that can talk about some of the econometric components, and I'll leave that to Dr. Nicholson to do that. But it's interesting when you look at the dairy industry today. It's this confluence of issues. It's both one of production, because we have 1.8% increase in production. But more importantly, it's the decrease in sort of the global market and the pressures that are being felt on our dairy industry here in Pennsylvania and around the United States because of what's happened in the EU with both lifting of their quotas and some market changes there, their lack of access to Russia for an export market. Underscores again sort of this industry is both a discussion of what happens in Pennsylvania, the United States, as well as around the world. And that is a significant change in the dairy policy of the last 10 years. So we have exported about 18% of production in the past, we being U.S., and today that's somewhere in the neighborhood of 12. So think about 6% less production export market. So that is a major factor in this conversation. And why we have engaged on the federal level, because dairy issue and dairy policy is also a federal discussion. We spent a lot of time in the last Farm Bill leading up to the Farm Bill to get the right policy. As each of you know, and on the committee and certainly members of the industry here, there was a transformative change in the last Farm Bill away from a direct payment to one of a risk management, a crop insurance type model, where individual producers had to take individual action, right, to buy a policy for protection of their production. That is a significant change. Now, we know that to be a good practice on the crop side, and we've done it for 40 years. We only have 2 years of experience really on the dairy side with that model. So, as we've said many times, the model is the right model. The components of that model aren't necessarily the right components, right? And we can talk more about that, and Senator Vogel, you have your own experience with it. But just to say that from a federal standpoint, that is one of the issues that I would put on the table for Pennsylvania and the committee, is to think about what we do in terms of the next Farm Bill to fix that, what we think is really an inadequate model, and how to really have the federal support that we expect and advocated for reflect the needs of Pennsylvania producers, and particularly the regional feed costs and other costs of this region. We have spent time just on the Market Protection Program, the MPP as it's referred to. We have spent time on that. We've worked with Senator Casey, who's led an effort with his colleagues in the Senate and the House. 61 members signed on to a letter that he championed. 8 members of the Pennsylvania congressional delegation supported that, and it had a number of components. But in it were both expression of need to Secretary Vilsack, the U.S. Department of Agriculture Secretary, as well as individual concerns around the market protection program. You have the written testimony, so I won't sort of launch into that. I'll just sort of skim the surface here to save time. But we also, as we look at the issue, we understand that it's a combination of things, as I noted. Part of that is state, part of it is federal. We have taken some actions in the last year, and again, thanks to the committee for your support. I mean, things like the Center for Dairy Excellence has been incredibly important. You can always do more, but just to say that the Center's done a great job, and the financial support received from the committee and advocacy has been important. The industry's taken some efforts to address the charitable food issue, right, and making sure that those who are in our community who are hungry also have access to food, and credit to the industry for the Fill a Glass with Hope initiative that they partnered with the milk dealers and the promotional organizations in the South Central Pennsylvania Food Bank to really help get milk to those folks who need it. 2016, we'll see about 2 million servings of milk going through the Fill a Glass with Hope, and I think we're very proud of that. There's also been some tax changes, which you're aware of, just to note. So all of these things are pieces of the puzzle, right? And what you've put on the table through House Bill 1265, is in part a response to what do we do to make full and take full advantage of the state authority. As we have said many times, that Pennsylvania is unique in that we have some state overorder pricing authority, which is not universal across the country. So having it is important to Pennsylvania. How do we use it is equally as important. And that's really the central topic of discussion around 1265, right? It's both the use of the authority and then making sure that those who are beneficiaries of that premium understand what it is that they're receiving, and if they don't know, how do we inform that by way of 1265. I note in the testimony a couple of things. First of all, that we are supportive of Representative Lawrence's bill 1265 and appreciate what he's done there and what the House has done particularly. We also, though, in looking at it, would suggest that there are a couple of other amendments that are important, because transparency is it's a nice word, right? But transparency then also requires a certain level of revelation, right? You've got to reveal things. So on one side, we have the Milk Marketing Board premium and what is generated and who is benefiting from that. The question is, do the producers understand how they're benefiting from the state overorder premium? And keeping in mind that we asked the Pennsylvania consumers to pay this premium. That's something the state felt many years ago was important to the Commonwealth to protect both our industry and promote fluid milk, but also so important that we ask our consumers to pay a premium for that milk. I think that carries an extra burden, right? That you then have to say, do we have a mechanism to reveal the premium that's generated and those who are benefiting from it? That's part of the transparency. The other part, and this gets to one of the changes that we would suggest, is on the cooperative side, that the cooperatives really have carried the burden of balancing a market. And there's no way that you can keep the Class 1 markets that we enjoy in Pennsylvania without some place to put the other classes of milk. Right? That's just one of the principles of milk marketing. So as we look at Pennsylvania, what we would suggest is transparency on the premium and how it's generated and who gets it. On the other side, to acknowledge that there is also an infrastructure in place that has to be sort of built and maintained, and that building and maintaining is done by our cooperatives in Pennsylvania. So making sure that we, in our transparency, is that we have both eyes on both the Milk Marketing Board premium and also on the infrastructure that's built in Pennsylvania that allows us to maintain the Class 1 market. And I think that's part of the discussion that we have to have. How do you do that? That's always going to be a point of maybe debate and dispute, but an acknowledgement from a public policy standpoint that we value the premium, we're asking consumers to pay, we want to know where it goes and who benefits, but we also say to maintain that, you also have to acknowledge the other classes of milk and who is balancing that marketplace. That's a new component to this conversation about the transparency. But as I've looked at it, you have to acknowledge, I say you, the industry, that we have to be equally as intent on acknowledging that full market and making sure that we can articulate who is in fact benefiting, how is that done in Pennsylvania, and give credit where credit is due. And on this issue of transparency, it is really critical to have both of those pieces in view. And that would be my point of recommendation to the committees, is how do we do that? How do you amend what's in 1265 to accomplish that? There is so much wasted energy right now on this topic. I believe strongly that given the issues that we're dealing with, that these are important discussions, but profitability of this industry at the moment is paramount. It's paramount, right? We have to make sure that we have an industry we can talk about and argue about what the right premiums are going forward and how to distribute them. So I don't want to, get lost in the transparency discussion without acknowledging that there's also a profitability and economic issue here that we want to really focus on. And part of the discussion, I think, to the chairs, what you're asking for from us is in totality, right? What is it that we should be thinking about as a Commonwealth, both in terms of economic development, the right tax policies, the federal farm bill and federal policies? All of that is part of the conversation of keeping a dairy industry in Pennsylvania. But it's also, I think, part of the transparency question, right? And that is really critical. So just a note to say thank you for hosting this discussion and all of the good work that allows agriculture to grow in Pennsylvania. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. We appreciate the information that you presented and appreciate you being here today. And I'd like to ask the members if they have any questions for the Secretary. Chairman Schwank.
Thank you, Representative Kauser. Thank you, Secretary Redding, for your testimony.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I totally agree with you on the issue of profitability. We need to be a united industry in order to address this. Let's go to the federal side first. And when I read your testimony, some of my questions were, how many Pennsylvania dairy farmers are receiving the MPP payments?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I don't know if I know the exact number, but of the 7,400s, first of all, they have to sign up, right? So there's an individual action. I don't know whether I speculate that it's something less than 1,000 PA producers have signed up.
So it really has not fulfilled the promise for a number of reasons, and I think producers are probably very astute to be somewhat wary of the program, and it has not functioned the way that it needs to. The letter that Senator Casey did to Secretary Vilsack, is there any opportunity for change to that program prior to the next Farm Bill? I mean, the 2014 Farm Bill, I don't know how many years it took to get it, but it was overdue, right? 6 years overdue, Elder tells me. I think we really need to see what we can do to upend that and get it done any quicker. What's your read on that?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and a little. I think it's a little difficult to make significant changes to the market protection program, margin protection program, before the next Farm Bill, right? Just because of the enabling authority that's found in the last Farm Bill, and whether the Congress, next Congress, is going to want to wade into an issue of agricultural policy outside of the Farm Bill, I think, is an open question. That said, we have raised the question with the Secretary to look at, and this is important, the issue of regional feed prices, right? There's a national feed price. And anytime you do national pieces, we understand why that's done for some of the macro policies, but you really need to get down to some regional feed price as a component. There are some things that the Secretary Vilsack could do outside of pricing on the policy side that producers have also talked about, things like how you handle premium and when do you pay premium, right? So that's an issue that has been raised by individual producers. So we have also, just on the regional feed price, one of the things that's missing is that the data is not captured on a state or regional basis, and that's an issue that we have raised with both the Agricultural Statistical Service in Pennsylvania and with the Secretary. And how do you fix that, right? Because if you're going to advocate for some other pricing, regional price, on what basis do you make that decision? And the reality is we don't have and haven't had collection of that core data that would allow for regional pricing at the moment. So we're going to keep advocating on the trade side. There's certainly some things they can do in the federal from a humanitarian food policy standpoint. There are some other economic development incentives around dairy and dairy purchases, product purchases, but at this point, very difficult to find a solution within the market protection program near term.
Is there anything we could do as legislators to be more proactive in pushing for the reform that we need at the federal level?
Yeah, I think there's a great point. So one is we've approached the Pennsylvania Agricultural Statistical Service, as I mentioned. What they have requested of us is payment. They need money, right, to do the survey, because that's not a survey paid for by the U.S. Department of Agriculture any longer. So we have to find dollars to do the survey as one point. Two, I think the voice of this committee and the committees at a state level, particularly given that you have state pricing authority in Pennsylvania that most states don't have, is to use that voice on the federal side. Because it's not as though we're simply asking for the federal government to do something, we're doing something ourselves. And I think that puts us in really a unique position to also then make the case for some of the reforms on market protection. Being on the record with those changes would be equally as important as a committee.
Thank you.
Representative Lawrence, we're already running over our time limit a little bit, so I would ask the speakers to be brief if possible.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. Thank you for recognizing me. And Secretary Reddick, it's very good to see you today. I appreciate you testifying.
Good to see you.
I appreciate in your testimony your highlighting the important role that cooperatives play in providing balancing and other services in the dairy industry. And I think having further clarity on milk checks with regard to the costs that are incurred for these services is probably always a good idea. I think I don't have any problem with that. My question is it this suggestion of the department that the cooperative should be able to deduct costs for lab testing, balancing, et cetera, from the state-mandated over-order premium?
Right. So a point of clarification, we're not suggesting in the testimony or by draft amendment any deduction from. It's simply an acknowledgement of those costs contribute to the balancing of the market. Okay? So it's not you take the state premium and then deduct those costs, as I noted in the testimony. That's not the point at all. It's simply transparency of what those costs are. Okay? And then we have to talk about how do you manage those other costs and represent those costs on the milk check. But that's the only point, not a deduction.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Argyle.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary, I'm curious. So you support the bill,
yes,
but you are also suggesting amendments. Have those amendments been shared yet with our chairman?
Not yet. We're waiting for the outcome of this testimony in the hearing, and one of them sort of round up and refine, I think, what we have identified as possible amendments for you.
Okay. One of your predecessors is here, Secretary Hayes. I knew him as House Majority Leader Hayes when he taught me that, you can have a technical amendment or you can have an amendment that completely rewrites the bill. Which of those two extremes would you say your amendment fits?
Well, I would say this. I mean, it's look at what you have as a great base. Okay, that is A. Now we're adding B to get C. Okay, so we're going to slot in this point about the cooperative infrastructure piece, right? So it's not as though it's a substitute for, it's in addition to. So I don't know in your world if that's substantive or technical, but I think if the overarching objective is transparency, that I put this in the technical category. Okay. Right? If that's the overarching objective, is we want everybody in the dairy industry in Pennsylvania to know premium generated, premium dispersed, benefit, right? If that's the objective, then this is a technical amendment.
Okay. And obviously, there's groups for this bill, the Farm Bureau, there's groups against this
Sure.
bill. Do you understand, will they be supporting or opposing this amendment, or is it still too early to say?
I think it's early, but I guess my appeal to them would be, we have an industry that we value in the state. We have unique pricing authority that is limited to at least 5 or 6 other states in the country. We are trying to extract every dollar we can out of the marketplace and ask Pennsylvania consumers to pay it. We should have the same expectation of the producers who are benefiting from it to know how they're benefiting from the state mandated premium. And today, that is not possible. So the appeal to them would be that we're generating it. Let's have an honest and transparent conversation and trust each other that this is not about, singling anybody out. It's simply an acknowledgement of the benefit of Pennsylvania premium and how that premium is used to advance the industry in Pennsylvania. That would be my appeal to them. At the end of the day, if they say, I don't want that transparency, well, then we should have another conversation, right? But let's start from the basis that we want that transparency and trust to be across the market.
Thank you.
Representative Kulovich.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, good to see you again. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
My question is in regards to the proposed amendment. And this isn't the amendment itself,
Right.
It's just your testimony. But it says amendment to the bill which would allow cooperatives to show, and this would have allowed cooperative members to see. By using the words would allow, or using that word would that leave too much leeway for the cooperatives and not achieve the desired effect by the department?
Well, I think in the testimony we say would. If you draft it as a technical amendment, it should be should.
Oh, okay.
Right?
And that's
yeah.
what I...
So it's not the exact language, but just in terms of presentation to the committees.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here today. And if you would kindly provide your draft amendments to the members, that would be very much appreciated so that we could review those and as the legislation may move forward in the future. So thank you so much for your testimony.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Our next testifier is Dr. Charles Nicholson from the Pennsylvania State University. He's a clinical associate professor, the Department of Supply Chain and Information Systems at the Smeal Business of College. Welcome, sir, and you may proceed.
Thank you very much. Chairman Kauser, Chairman Vogel, Chairman Carroll, Chairman Swank, thank you very much for the invitation to be here this morning. I have prepared a handout that's largely visual for you folks. You may want to refer to that as we go through my comments here this morning. One of the first things that I address is why is a guy from the business school at Penn State here talking about dairy issues? And so it's certainly true that Penn State doesn't pay my salary to come and talk about dairy industry issues. But in the information I provided, I note that I have been for about 15 years a standing member of the Program on Dairy Markets and Policy, which is a consortium of university, primarily agricultural economists who focus on dairy markets and policy issues. I've also been a resident and analyst of Northeast dairy industry issues for 25 years, as much as I hate to say that I've been working on those issues that long. I'd like to thank Secretary Redding for actually doing a lot of my work for me. He's provided you with, I think, is a very appropriate and accurate summary of the current state of a lot of the issues that we have before us. I wanted to highlight sort of a few things in terms of the importance of the industry, and then I also wanted to suggest that there are some what I view as rather significant challenges that we face going forward, particularly over the longer term, to maintaining the importance and the profitability of Pennsylvania's dairy industry. If you go to the second page in the handout that I provided, there's some information that you're undoubtedly mostly familiar with already. In terms of the size of the industry, the Secretary noted that it is the largest agricultural production sector. Working in a business school and being a supply chain guy, I also think about the other elements of the supply chain that are necessary to support farm-level production. By my calculations, in a higher-priced year like 2014, we would expect that we would generate probably more than $10 billion worth of household earnings throughout the state based on the entire supply chain from the production side through to retail. I also have a slide that shows that we have more than 300 dairy plants in the state of varying sizes. I'm all the way from Susie Q's homemade ice cream in Titusville down to my friend Tom Winger's Land O'Lakes Carlisle plant. And of course, the most important of the dairy plants in the state, from my perspective, is the creamery on the campus of Penn State. So I had to note that on the map as well. So you're all very much aware of the importance of the industry, the thousands of jobs, tens of thousands of jobs that the industry creates. I want to provide a little bit of a perspective on some of the things that I think are challenges for this industry going forward. And those are the things that are in the comments remaining on these things that I've called 4 challenges. You're probably familiar with the basic outline of what I'm going to say, but I think it's important to kind of have an open presentation of these and allow for some discussion. So one thing that's notable about Pennsylvania's dairy industry is that we have grown production significantly slower than other similar states. And I have a chart that basically says we're about at the same level of production that we were 15 years ago. A lot of that is due to slower growth in milk per cow. New York, our neighbor to the north, in that same period of time has grown by a little bit over 1% per year, or nearly 20%. A state like Wisconsin, which is experiencing sort of a dairy renaissance, has grown by nearly 25% in terms of total production during that time period. Okay? So this is partly a challenge because it suggests the size of the industry is going to be harder to grow, but it also has a relationship to the second of the challenges, which is really that the growth of processing and production are becoming much more coordinated over time, more of a supply chain kind of perspective. The Northeast has had discussions about plant capacity since I was a graduate student studying at Cornell in 1990. We continue to have those kinds of conversations today. However, the situation, I think, has become much more critical here in the Northeast as a result of recent events, and it makes for the need for a conversation about how to address those ongoing capacity issues. One of the things that relates to is processors like to build plants where they're going to have a growing milk supply that's going to be dedicated to the particular facility that they want to get milk into. Much harder to put new greenfield plants of a significant scale here in Pennsylvania compared to, say, Colorado or Idaho. So a third challenge that you're also probably familiar with is Secretary Redding referred to Class 1 utilization. You're aware that we price milk on the basis of its use in specific products, and Class 1 milk returns the highest payment to producers. We have seen a really dramatic decline in the total amount of producer milk being used in Class 1, either in the Northeast order, where a lot of Pennsylvania farm milk ends up, but also in the Mideast order, and also by the pricing that is being done under the PMMB. And I have a chart on the right-hand side there that shows that the value of milk, if you want to think about it as a total premium above the base manufacturing price, here in Pennsylvania has declined over time by nearly about $2 in the course of 5 years. So that's a significant impact based on the utilization of milk that has an effect on farm profits and margins. And finally, you're also well aware, and I echo Secretary Redding's comments in this regard, that we are in a very low margin period. One of the things that is important to keep in mind is this is a very cyclical industry on about a 3-year cycle. We had a fantastic year in 2014, And now we're in the low price part of the cycle that's creating the additional challenges. The only piece of good news that I would suggest from this is that on the last of the printed pages that I have, there's a chart that shows the previous margin cycle that started in 2011 and ended in 2014, which is the red line, and then the blue line is the current one. So we're at almost identical place in terms of the margin at this point in our cycle as we were during that previous cycle. And the only fortunate piece of news is that we managed to skip a lot of the really low part of the cycle that happened in 2012. And of course, one of the key questions going forward is how long is it going to take for us to get a recovery, and how high is that recovery going to take us? In 2014, we got to record milk prices, much to my surprise and the surprise of many dairy market analysts. Very few people are talking about that kind of recovery at that kind of pace during this current cycle. So the profitability challenge is there now. I have talked with a number of ag lenders, which is another way to get a perspective on how bad they think things are. Chris Lawton, who is with Farm Credit East, they lend in the eastern part of New York State, a longtime friend of mine, suggests that this is a downturn, it's a hard time, it's not the disaster that we saw in 2009 and 2012. And their dairy portfolio is still continuing to grow as they make decisions to lend to farmers who have a good business plan and are actually planning for success as we come out of this difficult time period. So with that, I'm going to stop my remarks, and if there are any questions, I'd be happy to attempt to answer them.
Thank you, Dr. Nicholson, for the information. I'd like to turn to the members now if there are any questions. Representative Diamond.
Thank you, Chairman Causer. I just want to go over a couple facts that you gave to us and maybe put them in context.
Sure.
You talked about 7,000 farms, 500,000 plus cows, $2.7 billion farm milk value, largest agricultural production sector in Pennsylvania. Okay, so your dairy is the biggest part of our agriculture piece. How does that compare to, where do we rank amongst the other 50 states in dairy production?
Okay, so we're the 5th largest dairy producing state of the U.S., behind California #1, Wisconsin #2, Idaho a little bit above New York right now, New York, and then us.
Okay. And I'm going to hark back to one of Secretary Redding's responses to Senator Schwank, and maybe he can chime in here. He pointed out something that I wasn't aware of, that Pennsylvania is one of the only states that does any kind of premium program, or maybe you want to clarify that and tell us about how that works for the Pennsylvania farmer as opposed to the Ohio farmer or whatever other state doesn't have that. Because I think that's why we're here all together. That's why we're focusing on House Bill 1265. It's because we want to make sure that whatever we're doing here is good for the Pennsylvania farmer. So if you could address that a little bit, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. So there are relatively few states in the U.S. that have any program that looks at all like what the PMAB does in pricing milk. The state of Maine has a program that does something somewhat similar, provides price premiums on fluid milk that essentially consumers are going to pay a little bit extra to support that. And in Pennsylvania, one of the big challenges is that the milk that is priced essentially has to be produced, processed, and consumed entirely within the state so that it doesn't get afoul of constitutional prohibitions on interstate commerce. Okay? The PMMB reports an impact in terms of the total dollars returned to producers. Off the top of my head, I don't know what that number is in recent months, but it's a significant component. And the graph that I had where you're looking at the challenge 3, where that blue line is talking about the margin above a basic manufacturing price. Some of that is reflecting the impact that the PMBB program has on additional premiums paid in on fluid milk. But there are some limits in terms of what states individually can do, although I would say in the case of Pennsylvania, the PMMB program has been significant in terms of providing additional dollars to producers.
Yeah, and I think what complicates this a little bit for some folks is that some of these, especially with the over-order premium question, is the fact that these co-ops are not just Pennsylvania milk co-ops. I mean, the milk that they use comes from other states. Is that correct?
So the dairy industry in the Northeast is one in which milk moves around a lot to find a lot of different homes. You could also say Secretary Redding noted that we have a significant export presence. It really is a globalized supply chain. It comes down to local farms here in the state of Pennsylvania, but they are really connected and integrated with a larger set of industry, businesses, and institutions that actually affect the outcomes at the level of the farm.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to point out for the public who's watching at home that this is not just a Pennsylvania issue. We have to deal with other states as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nicholson. We appreciate the information that you've presented, and we certainly know how to get a hold of you for additional information should the members require it. So thank you so much for being here
You're
with us
welcome.
today.
Thank you.
Our next testifier is Representative John Lawrence, the prime sponsor of House Bill 1265. Representative Lawrence, you may proceed when you're ready.
Well, good morning. Chairman Causer, Chairman Carroll, Chairman Vogel, Chairwoman Schwenk, and esteemed colleagues, I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to testify at this august assembly here today on House Bill 1265 regarding transparency for state-mandated milk premiums for Pennsylvania dairy farmers. Milk pricing is an extremely complicated subject. House Bill 1265 is narrowly tailored with one goal in mind: to ensure Pennsylvania farmers know how many, if any, state government-mandated premium dollars are in their milk check. In 1988, the Milk Marketing Board established an overorder premium, a fee assessed on every gallon of Class I fluid drinking milk sold in Pennsylvania. The fee has varied over the years and is currently set at $1.85 per hundredweight or 16 cents per gallon. The idea behind this state-mandated overorder premium is simple. Pennsylvania consumers would be willing to pay a little more per gallon if they knew that they were helping out the Pennsylvania dairy farmer and thus ensuring a steady, reliable source of local milk. As we all know, milk pricing is fickle, and right now prices are down dramatically. Trying to make a living as a small dairy farmer is harder than ever. The intent of the premium was to cushion the blow that national or even global forces might have on the small Pennsylvania family farmer. And it's built into the price consumers pay for milk at the grocery store, and it's to be paid back to the producer on milk that is produced, processed, and sold in the Commonwealth. For decades, this state-mandated premium has been collected on each gallon of milk sold in Pennsylvania, yet many family farmers do not know how much, if any, of that state-mandated money is actually getting back to them. Many have said to me that the money is, quote, lost in the system. Now, how can this be? Well, according to current Pennsylvania law and regulation, milk dealers paying family farmers, producers, must include a line item on the milk check showing the specific amount of state-mandated premiums contained in that check. And milk dealers paying cooperatives must include also a line item on the milk check showing the specific amount of state-mandated premiums in the check. But when cooperatives pay family farmers, under current law and regulation, they are under no obligation to disclose anything on the milk check showing the specific amount of state-mandated premium dollars contained in that check. House Bill 1265 seeks to correct this issue. This bill, less than 3 pages long, simply requires any family farmer receiving a milk check to be told how much money he or she is receiving as a result of the Milk Marketing Board's overorder premium. Today, farmers selling to milk dealers, as I mentioned, receive this information on every check. Farmers selling through cooperatives do not. A Pennsylvania family farmer has the right to know how much of the payment he's receiving in his check for the milk sold off of his farm comes from a state-mandated premium, regardless of whether that farmer sells his milk to a cooperative or via a milk dealer. The state-mandated overall premium should be transparent on all levels, but particularly to the family dairy farmer. A number of organizations, including the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau, have endorsed the accountability and transparency provided in this bill. However, it is no secret that House Bill 1265 has seen tremendous opposition, primarily from one large multi-state dairy cooperative, the Dairy Farmers of America. While I respect that everyone is entitled to their own opinion and that good people can disagree, I respectfully submit today to the committee that DFA's opposition to this bill is not in the best interest of Pennsylvania's dairy farmers.
Excuse me, Representative Lawrence, if you can, we're not going to be able to have the people in the center aisle. We're videotaping this for PCN so that everybody in the Commonwealth can see this hearing, and it's simply not safe to have people standing in the middle aisle. So if you would please disperse to the sides. Thank you. Representative Lawrence, you may continue.
Thank you, Chairman Causer. Last June, the Dairy Farmers of America Cooperative testified against this bill before the House Ag Committee and sent a follow-up letter to Chairman Causer on June 24th that was distributed to the committee. A copy of this letter has been provided to the committee today. It is in your handouts. In my opinion, the letter from DFA actually makes the case for transparency and accountability called for in House Bill 1265. To quote from DFA's letter, quote, "When DFA Northeast collects over-order premiums from the sale of milk, they are combined in one pool of money and lose state identity. In other words, there is no special account for PMMB premiums, New Jersey premiums, New York premiums, Class 1 premiums, manufacturing premiums, or other premiums. Once all of these premiums are collected and after marketing expenses are paid, the premiums are all paid to Northeast DFA members in the form of market-driven premiums." Colleagues, this is the heart of the issue. The Pennsylvania Milk Marketing Board established the Pennsylvania over-order premium to benefit Pennsylvania dairy farmers, period. It did not establish the premium so a milk cooperative can pad market-driven premiums they pay to dairy farmers throughout the Northeast. The fundamental claim that DFA is making in this letter, that they alone should be able to determine to send a government-mandated premium to out-of-state dairy farmers, points directly to the need for the additional accountability called for in House Bill 1265. Now notice that DFA states in their letter that they treat the Pennsylvania over-order premium as a, quote, market-driven premium. Colleagues, I would submit that while this is legal, I submit today that it is reprehensible, and it points to the need for House Bill 1265. A market-driven premium is one that is negotiated by the cooperative in the marketplace with the buyer of milk and is paid back to the dairy farmer members of that cooperative in whatever manner the cooperative determines best. The Pennsylvania Milk Marketing Board's over-order premium is not a market-driven premium. It is a state-mandated premium. The real question is this: is the Pennsylvania Milk Marketing Board's over-order premium just another revenue source for a cooperative to treat however they choose? Or should there be a shred of accountability that comes with a state-mandated premium? Again, cooperatives negotiate market-driven milk premiums for the benefit of the cooperative membership. It is not my business, nor do I believe it is the business of anyone in the government, how the cooperative distributes these market-driven premiums to their membership. However, when the cooperative takes a government-mandated premium intended by the state for the benefit of the Pennsylvania dairy farmer and treats it as just another market-driven premium that can be used any way the board of directors determines, that perverts the intent of the state milk marketing board's over-order premium. Another quote from this letter: "With respect to Pennsylvania, we, DFA, performed a special calculation for the month of April 2015 and found that the amount of market-driven premium dollars paid to Pennsylvania farms was more than double the amount of PMMB premiums collected for that month." Now, colleagues, this again makes the point for the need for House Bill 1265. Look carefully at what is being claimed. DFA claims that farmers are getting total market-driven premiums that are more than double the PMMB premium, so why should anyone complain? The truth is, Pennsylvania DFA farmers should be getting the Pennsylvania Milk Marketing Board's over-order premium on top of whatever market-driven premium DFA negotiates. Now, detractors of House Bill 1265 claim the simple disclosure of how the Pennsylvania Milk Marketing Board's over-order premium dollars are distributed would be difficult or impossible. This simply does not pass the smell test. I point to testimony provided by the Milk Marketing Board last year in reference to House Bill 1265. Quote, "The Milk Marketing Board reads the intent of House Bill 1265 as ensuring that all money that cooperatives collect as over-order premium payments be distributed to Pennsylvania dairy farmer members of the cooperative. and that the amount paid to each Pennsylvania dairy farmer member be shown as a line item on the statements from the cooperatives to its members. Our current thinking is that enforcement by the Milk Marketing Board would consist of the board developing a reporting mechanism for cooperatives to list Pennsylvania members and the amount of over-order premium that was shown on each of those members' milk checks. We would compare the total received by the members to the amount received by the cooperative to ensure they matched, and would spot check a statistically appropriate number of actual milk checks to ensure the reporting was accurate. Now, colleagues, nothing could be simpler. The Milk Marketing Board already knows how much of the Milk Marketing Board's overorder premium is received by each cooperative. Under House Bill 1265, the MMB would ask for a report from the cooperative showing a list of farmers who received the money and make sure the numbers matched. Detractors of this legislation have made various claims as to how the passage of this bill would somehow hurt Pennsylvania dairy farmers. Some of these claims include language that I believe is intended to confuse and obscure the simplicity of this bill. Again, I point to the letter DFA sent to Chairman Causer on June 24th of last year. We, DFA, do not penalize a farm from being further away from a Class 1 plant than its neighbor, nor do we penalize farms in a location where their milk may never touch a Class 1 plant because of distance or decisions we made dispatching the milk. Instead, cooperatives pool premium dollars to benefit all members. In summary, we want all farms to have the benefit of the diverse market in the Northeast, regardless of their location, end quote. Colleagues, nothing in this legislation prevents a cooperative from pooling state-mandated over-order premium dollars and paying them to Pennsylvania dairy farmers. There is nothing in this bill penalizing any farmer for being farther away from a Class 1 plant than someone else. I do take issue with DFA's stated practice of pooling the Pennsylvania created and mandated overorder premium with out-of-state dairy farmers. That is a key reason to support this bill. Now, certainly I sympathize with member farmers across the Northeast. I'm sure we all wish dairy farmers in the other 49 states received more money for their milk, but we are here to represent the Pennsylvania dairy farmer, to ensure their well-being. We are here to ensure that the 16 cents paid every time a gallon of milk is sold in this state, as mandated by the state, is treated with care and dignity, and that the Pennsylvania dairy farmers knows as much as possible about how that 16 cents impacts them. I submit that we are not here to condone the practice of taking precious dollars paid by Pennsylvanians and intended for our own state's dairymen and, quote, combining them in one pool of money so they lose state identity, end quote. Accountability, transparency with any money resulting from any government-mandated tax, fee, premium, whatever word is used, accountability and transparency should be a given. House Bill 1265 requires exactly that, accountability and transparency to the Pennsylvania farmer. Colleagues, I close my testimony with this simple illustration. A few years back, the legislature established a shale gas impact fee. Now imagine if the legislature instituted the impact fee, Chesapeake Energy collected the fee, and distributed the funds however they deemed appropriate. No one at the state level ever bothered to ask what Chesapeake did with the fund money. And imagine after a few years it was learned that some of the impact fees were used to fix roads in Ohio that had been damaged by drilling rigs. Who among us would stand for that?
Representative Lawrence, if you could wrap it up.
I'm almost done. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All of us would clamor for additional state oversight to ensure those impact fees went to their intended recipients. I would like to sincerely thank the chairman and the committee for the opportunity to speak on the need for this legislation, and I'd be happy to take any questions from the members. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions from members? Representative Zimmerman.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Causer, and thanks, Representative Lawrence, for your testimony. Representative, just a question revolving around what those numbers might look like on a milk check. For example, in my district and Lancaster County especially, we have a large number of Mennonite and Amish farms that are generally 40 to 70 cows. So what is a milk check? What's that line going to look like on a milk check? Was anything done to take a look at that at all?
Right, so the bill is very open-ended. And what is envisioned is simply a line on the milk check that would say, of the $1,000 paid in this milk check, $50 is from the Pennsylvania Milk Marketing Board's over-order premium, or whatever the numbers would actually be.
But has there any calculations been done on a, say, a 50-cow herd on a given milk check, what that would amount to?
So that's a good question. And I do not have the answer to what would it be for a 50-cow herd. What I can say is that the total over-order premium, I sent a letter to the Milk Marketing Board and asked them for data for January 2012 through May of 2013. So this information is dated. But the total over-order premium dollars, just the premiums that we're talking about here today, collected during that time period statewide was nearly $76 million. Now, that would be less today because the over-order premium at the time was over $2, and today it's $1.85. But we're not talking about chicken feed. We're talking about millions of dollars statewide.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Schwank?
Thank you. Representative, have you looked at the amendments that have been proposed by PDA and reviewed how they might impact the legislation? Are you favorable to them? I think the department makes some good points.
Yes, I look forward to seeing the amendments as they're drafted from the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture. I think those are probably some well-natured and good-intentioned additions to the legislation. Again, I think anything that comes back to providing additional transparency and accountability, even with the costs incurred by the cooperatives for the valuable services that they provide, I think that's fantastic. What I will be looking for is just to ensure that there's no hint of deducting any costs for the cooperative out of that state-mandated premium.
So you're focused only on the state-mandated premium, not on other costs that a cooperative might assess members?
So the focus on this bill primarily is the state-mandated premium. Costs that are incurred by the cooperative would be, in my view, would be paid for by fees that the cooperative negotiates when they're selling milk to whoever they're selling it to, whether it be a Class 1 fluid milk processing plant, Hershey Foods for chocolate bars, or whoever it is. Hershey might pay more because a milk cooperative says we're going to provide a certain quantity of milk guaranteed every day for the next 10 years, or whatever it might be. As they go out into the marketplace and negotiate those prices with whoever they're selling the milk to, those are the market-driven premiums that then they turn around and they distribute to their farmers, and they may not distribute them equally. They may distribute those market-driven premiums to their members based off of members. They may, for example, provide one of their members with additional money because they consistently have a higher quality of milk. They consistently deliver a higher quantity of milk. That's all up for the cooperative and its member owners to determine, and it's not the business of the government. What is the business, in my view, of the government is that since this is a state-mandated premium, we should have some idea of is it getting to the intended beneficiary, which is the Pennsylvania dairy farmer, and not, for example, out-of-state dairy farmers, which we have on the record is happening today.
Chairman Carroll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Lawrence, thank you so much. You and I disagree on this one, respectfully. I would simply offer this observation, that when a farmer and a farm make a decision to participate in a co-op, they make that decision because they think it advances the financial interests of their farm with the usage of the milk. And by participating in the co-op, you derive certain benefits from being a member of that co-op. And so I understand what you're driving toward here, but in my opinion, and this may not be popular in this room, the benefits that you get from being in the co-op, you seem to be trying to have it both ways. We'd like to have all the benefits of being in the co-op, except for this one provision, and we'd like to separate that one provision out and gain the benefit that you get from being not in a co-op, that somebody that's not in a co-op gets. So I think that there's some nuance here that is worth considering, and I know that as the Senate contemplates this bill, that they'll get to that nuance. But it really, there's a little bit more to it than I think than casting, sort of a suggestion that the co-ops are doing something sinister here. In my opinion, the co-ops, including DFA, do a wonderful job on behalf of their members. They do their level best to try and market the milk and advance the interests of the farmers. So I'll stop there and say thank you for your participation and your advocacy on behalf of this bill.
So, if I may, Chairman Carroll, and I tremendously respect your advocacy and your very hard work on the issue, I would submit that joining an organization does not preclude you from the protections of the government. And if I might use perhaps an imperfect illustration, but an illustration nonetheless, if one joins a labor union, and the reason one joins a labor union is such that the labor union, there's a perceived benefit of negotiating of salaries or benefits or whatever it may be, that does not preclude the individual from the rights and guarantees of the government. For example, if the labor union were to negotiate a rate, for example, less than the minimum wage, which might be far-fetched, but I present it nonetheless, none of us here today would say, oh, sure, that's fine. Since you joined a labor union, if that's all they could negotiate, then that's all you're going to be able to get paid. No, you have the protection of the minimum wage that's established by the state government. So I would submit that this is much the same. The state-mandated overorder premium is something that the government has set up for the benefit of Pennsylvania dairy farmers. And the idea that that money then going to a cooperative can be sent, as we have on the record here, to out-of-state dairy farmers simply because that's the will of the cooperative's board of directors, which is populated perhaps 90% by folks who are not from Pennsylvania but from out of state, I just don't see that as fair.
Thank you, Representative Lawrence. Thank you for all your work on this legislation and all your work on behalf of Pennsylvania dairy farmers.
Thank you.
I'll turn it over. Chairman Vogel.
Thank you, Chairman Kyles. At this time, we have Rick Ebert, President of Pennsylvania Farm Bureau, and Chris Herr, who's Executive Vice President of Penn Ag Industries. And guys, I hate to put you up against it, but we're down to about 35 minutes of time here, so make your comments brief, and we'll try to keep questions brief, and we'll get through this if we can. Thank you.
Nice job. Good morning, committee chairs, senators, and representatives. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss Pennsylvania's dairy industry and House Bill 1265. For more than a decade, I've testified regularly before the Pennsylvania Milk Marketing Board, sharing the trends of my farm's detailed input costs and profit margins. I don't intend to go that far into the weeds today, but will simply say that things are extremely tight right now on the farm and others across the U.S. Low milk prices and rising input costs are pinching farm families just like mine. For many dairymen, 2016 began to feel a lot like 2008 and 2009, when we unfortunately saw a number of dairy farms go out of business. In 2014, we were able to prepay many expenses, so the low prices in 2015 were uncomfortable but bearable. However, last year's tight margins prevented me from prepaying any expenses for 2016, making this situation quite drastically different. Today, many dairy farmers are living on lines of credit, and when the prices do turn around, will need to dig out of significant debt. Unfortunately, many parts of the state have been hit hard by dry weather, adding salt to an already open wound. And as you know, insurance, labor, personnel costs, mortgage payments, property taxes, expenses for repair parts and general supplies, and the costs associated with environmental regulation and compliance are not put on pause just because my farm profits shrink or disappear. Things are tight, and farmers of all commodities are stressed in this current market. Today, I sit before a panel of state lawmakers who, unfortunately, cannot wave a magic wand and make the price of milk increase for dairy farmers in Pennsylvania. But as state lawmakers, you can seek to maintain a positive business environment for farms, for family businesses. As you know, our farms are indeed family businesses. Our small businesses are very complex in equipment, scope, function, record keeping, and management. As state lawmakers, I encourage you to help define the delicate balance in improving local water quality and keeping farming families on productive ground. Farm Bureau thanks the legislature for ongoing commitment to the extension and research. This allows the brilliant minds at Penn State to share their knowledge with farmers across the state and help us implement food safety, pest management, crop science, and animal health techniques on our farms. We also want to thank you for making sure that family farms are not subjected to the onerous inheritance tax liabilities, and that when farmland is preserved, real estate transfer taxes are not imposed. These important steps will help keep Pennsylvania families farming. In my short time remaining, I'd like to comment on House Bill 1265. My written testimony describes in detail the main provision of House Bill 1265. Pennsylvania Farm Bureau supports House Bill 1265. We support the concept of transparency by every marketeer of milk, identifying the amount of payment received that is attainable to the state-mandated overorder premium. Transparency is always a good thing, and it is especially true given that some of our dairy farmers are currently receiving significant amounts of the premium while others are not. We have heard from several farmers who understand House Bill 1265 will change the course of dairy in Pennsylvania, improve market conditions. And while we support this legislation, we must also note to both the lawmakers and farmers that House Bill 1265 will not impact any of the market forces that drive milk prices. Pennsylvania Farm Bureau encourages Senate, House, and Ag Rural Committee to take positive action on House Bill 1265 and provide transparency to dairy farmers to desire to see that their milk checks are related to the PMM overorder premium. At the national level, Farm Bureau has encouraged USDA to exercise its ability to pump some money into the dairy economy by purchasing dairy products for nutrition programs and food banks. We are hopeful that USDA will take such action. In years past, we've seen federal lawmakers take swift action to make sure large businesses and vital industries do not close their doors. Many feel that the current federal dairy program overpromised or underdelivered, both or perhaps both. Either way, Farm Bureau is examining what additional federal actions might be helpful to keep dairy farmers, engines of their local economy, in operation. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate the invitation to speak today. I look forward to any questions that you have. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be speaking next to Rick and the Farm Bureau and all they represent. On behalf of the 500 Penn Ag members, thank you all for this opportunity. Leading up to today, many ask why Penn Ag was on the agenda. While we're most often associated with issues related to hog and poultry industries, the members of Penn Ag represent the support system for all of agriculture. Our members provide feed, seed, fertilizer, consulting and management services, equipment, building, and financial services for farmers of all types and all sizes throughout the Commonwealth. As an organization, we offer a big tent where all are welcome. Big, small, conventional, organic. The issues facing agriculture are too important to differentiate. Penn Ag is proud of our ability to work with diverse groups and of all types of organizations. Though we may be philosophically on different pages as to the solutions to some challenges, we look to find common ground on issues that benefit all segments of agriculture. Penn Ag has found itself in a bit of a crossfire as it relates to Pennsylvania's dairy industry the past few weeks. It seems to revolve around the issue of House Bill 1265. My take is that there are individuals who would like our assistance navigating Harrisburg. Despite bizarre accusations of political corruption and the insinuation that Penn Ag would throw a certain segment of agriculture under the bus, we will continue to work on behalf of all agriculture for the betterment of agriculture here in Pennsylvania. Dating back many years, Penn Ag adopted the philosophy that we would not disparage one segment of agriculture to benefit another. The issues facing agriculture will require all segments of the industry to work together. For the record, after a deliberate and thoughtful process with our legislative committee and our board, we decided there was no reason to oppose 1265. It's unlikely that many folks who wrote letters or Costa Penn Ag would know that, because we were not contacted or reached out to. That being said, I think it's important, and Secretary Redding said it very well. There's a lot of wasted energy going on right now because there are issues that are critical to agriculture that we believe the legislature needs to look at as soon as possible. Not minimizing the importance of 1265. Representative Lawrence made a great point for it, and we're supportive of it, but I'd like to talk about them for just a minute. The Pennsylvania dairy industry, no doubt, is the cornerstone of the Commonwealth's agriculture economy. Like most of agriculture right now, it's hurting. Oversupply, low prices, along with drought in many parts of Pennsylvania has cast a dark cloud over the dairy farmer. If misery loves company, no one in agriculture is lonely. Eggs are at a record low, the price of corn is below break-even levels, and ag manufacturers are laying off thousands. Instead of dividing agriculture, we should be focused on the issues that, if not addressed, will be the first to put farmers out of business. If there was ever an issue that could change the face of Pennsylvania agriculture, it's looming out there. It would be the Environmental Protection Agency could quite simply say, you're not allowed to expand or grow agriculture in Pennsylvania. No more broiler houses, no more hog houses, and oh, by the way, that 35-cow dairy farm cannot add 5 more cows. It's a possibility. Earlier this summer, the EPA notified Pennsylvania that it would be developing Pennsylvania-specific goals for reducing nutrients and sediments in the Pennsylvania portion of the Chesapeake Bay watershed to help the Commonwealth get back on track to meet its 2025 TMDL commitments. EPA has said that Pennsylvania's latest plan for getting the Chesapeake Bay cleanup back on track does not include any milestones to increase the number of conservation practices on the ground, and no additional requests for more resources to make that happen. This fall and early winter, Penn Ag would like to work with the members of both committees and all of agriculture, and our partners are many, and many of them are from the dairy industry, to put a legislative budget initiative together, complete with funding, to enable it on behalf of all farmers. Let's begin with an infusion of dollars to the conservation districts. Who knows better what on-the-ground needs farmers have than the conservation districts? Let's follow that up with cost-share dollars for BMPs and planning. And lastly, let's make sure that all the great work that farmers are doing on their farms, because it's the right thing to do, is counted towards our commitments. I believe we are making progress as it relates to cleaning up the Chesapeake Bay, and even the most ardent activists had admitted that there are positive changes happening. Submerged aquatic vegetation, water grasses are at the highest level in 30 years, and recently the blue crab population has bounced back significantly. In the summer of 2005, the Pennsylvania legislature passed the most important piece of agricultural legislation of this century when Act 38, the Acre Law, became law. I believe that this legislature can do the same thing with an initiative that focuses on the needs of farmers as it relates to the Chesapeake Bay. I appreciate this opportunity to bring this issue to you on behalf of all farmers in Pennsylvania, and specifically dairy farmers. Thank you very much.
Thank you both for your comments and reports this morning here. Anybody have any questions for either one of the gentlemen this morning? Okay, thank you both very much. Thank you. Next up. Next up, we have Tom Winger, Director of Governance and Leader Development from Land O'Lakes, and Kirk Satizan, Director of Marketing for Select Sour Power. Gentlemen, go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Causer, Chairman Vogel, and committee members. Thank you for inviting Land O'Lakes to participate in this joint informational meeting. My name is Tom Wegner. Previously, I served as the Director of Economics and Dairy Policy for 10 years, from 2005 to 2015 for Land O'Lakes. Land O'Lakes is a dairy cooperative with 2,200 dairy farmer member owners. We have a national membership base. Land O'Lakes members own several cheese, butter powder, and value-added plants in the upper Midwest, East, and California. Currently, our 1,070 Pennsylvania dairy member farms produce over 7 million pounds of milk per day, most of which gets processed at our Carlisle plant, where we make butter and dried milk powders. We also market members' Pennsylvania milk to third-party customers. Land O'Lakes has had a long-standing business proposition in Pennsylvania. For over 35 years, we have made Land O'Lakes branded butter at our plant in Carlisle. Prior to merging with the Atlantic Dairy Cooperative in 1997, we contracted directly with Atlantic Dairy Cooperative to make our butter at the Carlisle plant. Since merging, we have invested significant dollars to expand the plant's butter production capacity, double its dried powder packaging capacity, and enhance its water filtration process. In total, we have invested $118 million in the Carlisle plant since 1998. The Carlisle plant has served as an important asset to Pennsylvania, employing 200 people. It has provided a critical regional function in balancing milk supplies and represents one of Land O'Lakes' most indispensable dairy assets. Including our Purina locations, Land O'Lakes provides 382 jobs with an average payroll annually of $25.5 million. Today and throughout 2015-16, the U.S. dairy market has been negatively impacted by market factors outside the country. The growth of milk in the European Union, combined with less demand for dried proteins by international customers, has kept milk prices low. Pennsylvania all milk prices have weakened to levels $1 lower than 2015 and over $9 lower than the peak milk prices of 2014. Despite this period of lower milk prices in 2015 and 16, northeastern dairy farmers continued to increase milk production. For example, during May 2016, Pennsylvania's dairy farms collectively produced 21 more loads per day than they did in May 2014. Additionally, New York's dairy farms over the same two-year period have added 158 more loads to the regional supply. In total, the two states have added slightly more than 6.1 million pounds of milk to the regional supply each day. This huge surge in regional growth created an imbalance of milk supply and market demand, putting a huge amount of pressure on the dairy plants in the Northeast, resulting in the dumping of over 30 million pounds of milk in May, as reported by the Market Administrator of Federal Milk Marketing Order No. 1. This significant volume of milk growth, combined with less demand for Class 1, lack of regional processing capacity, and miserable economics in moving milk out of the region, have put significant stress on our Carlisle plant, as it is being asked to process more milk than ever before, especially on weekends and holidays. As you know, Land O'Lakes implemented a milk-based program this year across all of its milk sheds. Implementing a base plan has been an important part of our strategy to address our marketplace-backed philosophy and members' desire to grow their production. We have discussed the base plan with our Pennsylvania dairy members and have used the plan to implement more discipline and communication into the dairy supply chain to better capture market opportunities to maximize the value of members' milk production. This is not a new approach to Land O'Lakes members. We have had similar programs in place in California members since 2008 and for our Bismarck, North Dakota members since September 2006. Land O'Lakes is neutral on HB 1265. We neither oppose nor support the bill. During meetings this spring with our Pennsylvania members, we discussed the PMMB overorder premium's contribution to our Pennsylvania members' premium revenues. We showed members how much is collected from our Class 1 customers and thereby subject to PMMB pricing. We then divided this dollar value by our Pennsylvania members' total milk production. The PMMB revenues represented less than 10% of our Pennsylvania members' premium revenues. Now that all of our Pennsylvania member milk is RBST-free since late 2015, we share the PMM premium with all of our Pennsylvania dairy farmers. Currently, the Land O'Lakes premiums paid to our Pennsylvania dairy members far exceeds the PMMB premium that we receive for member milk produced, processed, and sold into the Class 1 market in Pennsylvania. If HB 1265 becomes law, we will comply with its provisions. I'd also like to restate our support for the Pennsylvania Association of Dairy Cooperative regulatory proposal to include cooperatives' procurement costs into the PMMB minimum prices. Specifically, we are very supportive of the new section 149.46. This regulation will enable the board to collect data which will quantify and recognize costs borne by cooperatives in the procurement of fluid milk, which parallel costs incurred by dealers. When these costs are borne by processing dealers, they are considered in the price buildup. When these same costs are borne by cooperatives, however, they are not presently included. The proposed section 149.46 establishes the framework for collecting this cost data from cooperatives, and we are totally supportive of this action by the board. That concludes my prepared comments. I look forward to answering any questions you may have, and thank you again for the opportunity to participate in this hearing today.
Thanks, Senator Vogel. And you have a copy of my summary, so I'll only shorten my remarks here today. Opportunity, I'm glad to be a third-generation Pennsylvania dairy farmer and East Coast Director of Marketing for Select Sires. We have 144 employees that serve 5,000 dairy producers in Pennsylvania, and we're awfully glad to work with those folks. The ability to be close to the Pennsylvania dairy producer gives us a unique position to gauge the strength of the Pennsylvania dairy industry. The Pennsylvania Center for Dairy Excellence provides many resources for these dairy producers that they can use to develop their business plans. One of the most successful are dairy profit teams and transformation teams that allow producers of all ages and sizes to call in outside help for their businesses. As I participate in these team meetings, I notice an increasing frustration with the regulation that our dairy producers must deal with when it comes time to grow their business. The modern dairy producer in Pennsylvania generally knows that milk prices will be volatile, productive land in Pennsylvania is expensive, and dairy infrastructure is strong but changing from when we had a more rural state. The modern dairy producer has learned to deal with these challenges, but they do have a tough time understanding why regulations for growing a dairy business in Pennsylvania put them at a disadvantage to dairy producers in surrounding states. And in many cases, these producers are not looking to always get bigger, but they are looking to get better. I recently sat around a farm table of a young dairy couple in southeastern Pennsylvania, excited to build on a dairy business established by the previous generation. They placed a 300-page environmental study on the table and told all of us participating in the meeting to look at our $70,000 book. This young couple, prepared to invest over $1 million in their dairy business and the community, were increasingly frustrated that they would potentially have to invest $150,000 in studies and permitting processes before the first shovel could go in the ground. The state of Michigan has a much simpler business approval process that has fostered tremendous growth for their dairy economy. When our dairy producers see that growth and hear the simplicity for a Michigan dairy producer to grow their business, they ask, why not us? And I hate to correct Dr. Nicholson, but recently Michigan passed Pennsylvania to enter the top 5 milk-producing states for the first time in our history. First time we've ever been out of the top 5 happened in July of this year. And in closing, I'll just say that the Pennsylvania dairy industry is a tremendous asset for our Commonwealth. We can protect this natural resource by allowing another excellent natural resource, the Pennsylvania dairy producer, to prosper. I work with enough professional dairy managers in Pennsylvania to know that their concern for the environment, their animals, and their employees on the farm is of utmost importance. Allowing these producers to grow their businesses by simplifying the permitting process and stabilizing milk markets will ensure that our industry can remain a cash cow for Pennsylvania's economy. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Are there any questions for either our Senator Argyle?
I promise to be quick. Land O'Lakes, it sounds to me from your testimony as if you're already complying with the intent of House Bill 1265. You're providing this information to your members. Then why not go the next step and support the bill itself?
From my perspective, we are being open with them. We haven't gone the next step of actually printing it on the check, Senator. But again, if HB 1265 came in, we would comply with it.
Well, if it's the law, you wouldn't have a choice.
Correct.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions for our panelists? Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Next up, we have Justin Reiser, President of Pennsylvania Dairy Managers, and Rob Barley, a dairy farmer from Lancaster.
You want to go first? His name's Justin Risser. Thanks, Rob. And I apologize. I only have 5 extra copies of my script. I wasn't prepared for all of you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Justin Risser, a dairy farmer and president of the Professional Dairy Managers of Pennsylvania. I'd like to thank you for inviting me here today to share a dairy farmer's perspective of Pennsylvania's dairy industry. My family and I own and operate Meta Vista Dairy in Lancaster County. We milk 750 cows and crop 700 acres. We currently employ 13 people full-time and produce enough fluid milk to feed the city of Allentown, Pennsylvania. Our farm is very representative of the Professional Dairy Managers of Pennsylvania, which is a member organization of dairy farmers who are pro-growth in their business strategies, committed stewards of the environment, and intentionally setting up a family-sustaining business for the next generation. Most PDMP farms, like mine, are third and fourth generation or even longer, and most have modernized in order to keep the farm sustainable. We are all significant contributors to the dairy industry, to the dairy economy in Pennsylvania, as well as our local economy. Each dollar spent by the dairy gets multiplied 2.5 times in the local economy. Our dairy farm purchases machinery, trucks, fuel, and pays for services from local vendors, from ag supply and equipment repair services to veterinarians, accountants, and nutritionists. We take seriously our role in the overall contribution to the Pennsylvania dairy production industry, and we will continue to grow and modernize. That will not happen without addressing a couple issues within Pennsylvania we see as inhibitors to growth, obstacles to growth, and modernization. And some of my comments here this morning are going to be echoes of things that were already stated here. Today, our environmental regulation and permitting processes are at a competitive disadvantage to Pennsylvania dairy farmers, particularly if you look at regulation and permitting in states with whom we compete, New York, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And I'm going to skip over some of my comments because a good friend of mine, Kirk Sazen, already elaborated and gave a really good example of how long the permitting process can take and also how much it can cost. PDMP and some of our partners in the dairy industry have had some promising discussions with executives within PDMP of late, and we hope that the legislator will work with the agency and the dairy industry to streamline the process and improve the future of Pennsylvania's dairy industry. Agriculture is the strongest industry in Pennsylvania, and dairy is the strongest segment, as mentioned earlier, of that ag economy. The benefits of the dairy industry go far beyond the refrigerator to nearly $7 billion in economic revenue. And a lot of this was also echoed this morning, and I won't take up more of your time. In all honesty, Pennsylvania should rank in the top 5 states in the nation. As Kirk corrected, we were just passed by Michigan here a month ago. But we have been surpassed by states which have recognized agriculture's role in the overall economy and have adapted policies and strategies to grow the industry. Competitive states like Michigan and New York embrace policies and incentives that recognize the economic development potential of agriculture and encourage growth and modernization within the agriculture sector. Like these states, Pennsylvania should recognize and address its need for more processing capacity and become more aggressive in attracting food and dairy processors to the Commonwealth. We were encouraged to see that the Secretary of Agriculture has been added to the PA Board of Directors and hope this is an indication that states' economic development leaders are beginning to recognize agriculture as an important industry rather than a hobby of farmers. With the cost of production and environmental compliance at an all-time high and milk prices at their lowest, it has become increasingly difficult for dairy producers to successfully operate our dairy farms. My personal belief is that the impediments of sustaining a viable dairy farm are fixable in our Pennsylvania policymakers if they would adopt a proactive economic development strategy for agriculture and streamline our permitting processes here in Pennsylvania. Again, thank you for the opportunity to speak before the committee today. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have today and in the future. And as always, I offer PDMP as a reliable resource to the committee and its staff on issues that may impact the dairy industry in Pennsylvania. We hope you see us as a partner in your work for the citizens of the Commonwealth, and feel free to contact us at any time. I will let Rob speak, and if you have any questions regarding my stance on the bill, I'll let you ask that question if time permits.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Vogel, Schwank, Chairman Kauser, and Chairman Carroll for the opportunity to speak here today. My name's Rob Barley from Star Rock Dairy Incorporated in partnership with my brother and my cousin. We farm in Conestoga, which is Lancaster County, milk about 1,400 cows. Our milk goes next door to Turkey Hill Dairy through Dairy Farmers of America. It's marketed through Dairy Farmers of America. I could talk about all the current conditions, but it would repeat of a lot of what was talked about. I do want to reiterate one point. Recently, the Lancaster Ag Council, which I'm a member of, and I'm not representing them here today, had the opportunity to meet with Secretary Redding and the Interim Secretary McDonald. And I just want to commend Secretary Redding for his leadership in bringing together, the parties in Pennsylvania to address the issue of the Chesapeake Bay reboot and the issues of the permitting and so on and so forth, which has been mentioned previously and are certainly real disadvantages for us here in Pennsylvania. Moving on to the Pennsylvania Milk Marketing Board. We're talking today about House Bill 1265. We've got to back up a little bit and talk a little bit about the Pennsylvania Milk Marketing Board. The current bill is a bill that was previously introduced in different forms, and this is the most watered down per se bill. So this is not the only thing that needs to happen at the Pennsylvania Milk Marketing Board. This is, although it's an important issue, may not even be the most important issue. But I think it's an opportunity to get started. Eventually, we're going to have to deal with the stranded premium, the amount of money that is not being accounted for, that goes out of state and does not come back in. And that's not have anything to do with the co-ops. That's just the way the process works. There's nothing illegal going along. It's just like taxes. When you at the end of the year, you get an accountant to prepare your taxes, and his job is to find every loophole so that you don't have to pay the least amount of taxes possible. Well, that's kind of what's going on with the premium. They're skirting around different ways, not illegally, to not account for the premium, and that somehow needs to be addressed at some point. Certainly the inequitability of the premium, because it's just on Class 1, a shrinking Class 1, people drinking less and less milk and eating more cheese, eating more yogurt and other products. So that somehow, that class of Class 1 is getting smaller and smaller. So at some point, if we're going to have an overall premium, that's going to need to be addressed. Finally, the Pennsylvania Milk Marketing Board is an organization that has been very tight. It's heavily litigated. Everybody there has their own lawyers. It's very closed to change. And then the parties that are involved, of course, they all have good lobbyists. And the farmers are sometimes left out in the cold. So those are some issues that need to be addressed after this bill, if and when this bill passed. But let's just take a look at House Bill 1265. Like I said, this current bill is simply a start. One important thing is developing the farmer designation. I'm a member of a co-op. I'm happily a member of a co-op. And for all the reasons, Representative Carroll, you mentioned, that's great. But this is a regulated issue that because it's regulated and because the money is being collected as a per se tax to be distributed, there needs to be oversight. And just because you're part of a co-op doesn't mean there shouldn't be oversight. So not to that's to argue your point. That's where I want to get at. I want to acknowledge that the co-ops do a lot of great work, and we wouldn't be where we are without them, with the balancing and so on, and the leadership they've shown. But they're not. We're members of Land O'Lakes and DFA, the majority of dairy farmers. They're not small organizations. They're nationwide organizations. So it's a little different. So we need some protection from our state legislature. So the question I asked, why should government get involved? And I think the answer is they already are. They're already collecting that. They're already enforcing the collection of that premium. So they should have their hands in it. I think Representative Lawrence answered that very well. Finally, going back to the issues of milk marketing, I was in a discussion, and I'm not going to name the name, but someone who knows milk marketing very well. I said, how many people, the question to him is, how many people in Pennsylvania truly know and truly understand how milk is priced and so on in Pennsylvania? He said 20, and I'm one of them. Not me, him, the person I was talking to. And that's the issue. So we need to have some oversight here, because it is a very, very complex issue that needs to have some folks that have our best interests, and not that the co-ops and not that the milk dealers don't necessarily, but you know, there still needs to be oversight and an understanding by those that can help us out and advocate for us. So thank you, Chairman, and if there's any questions.
Are there any questions from the panel for either one of these gentlemen? Oh, Representative Mall.
Thank you, Senator. Justin, did I hear you say at the end of your speech, if anybody wanted to know where you personally stood on the issue? I want to know where you personally stand on the issue.
And when I give my personal opinion, I am not speaking for PDNP, okay? Because as a group, we can't come to a consensus. So therefore, PDNP remains neutral. But as a producer, all I can say is the goal of this bill is to promote transparency. And we ship through Mountjoy Farmers Co-op and through DFA. And the 10 years since I returned from the farm, from college, for 10 years I've been on the farm. I've gone to the annual meetings with Mountjoy when they were part of Dairy Lee, which is now part of DFA. I've gotten a financial statement at the end of the meeting. If I've ever had any questions about where the money's going, I always had a resource. I've never felt like anything was being hidden from me. My personal take is I think there's bigger fish to fry in growing this economy. And one thing that I think is, there's two things, and I mentioned them here, is processing capacity and dairy permitting. And those two things, I think if we hit them out of the ballpark, will drive our dairy economy. I'm not saying this isn't important. I mean, there's a lot of people that support this bill, and they support transparency. I'm not opposed to transparency. I just think there's bigger fish to fry and bigger things that could be had for the dairy farmer with those two things if the Pennsylvania legislator sees them as important and takes the comments that were mentioned not only by me, but by Kirk and others here this morning that are working with farmers that are truly farmers and say, these are the things, these are the obstacles that are keeping our guys from getting better and getting bigger and becoming more efficient. Those are the things that are the roadblocks, I feel.
That sounds like a definite neutral to me.
I should be a politician, right?
We had 9 people testify today, and I didn't actually hear one person say, I'm opposed to this bill for this reason. So if there is somebody that is opposed to this bill for a specific reason, I'd like them to look me up after this is over and tell me what that is. So with that, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. At this time, we'll have anybody on the panel here. Legislators have any closing comments before we close up for the day? Senator Swank.
Thank you, Senator Vogel, and thank you everybody for being here today. If there's anything that's clear to me after sitting here for a couple of hours, all of you people are standing here in an awful warm room, not just about House Bill 1265, but about the issue of profitability, not only in the dairy industry, but in agriculture, period. 1265, and I think our young farmers said it really well, we maybe have bigger fish to fry. I think we can get to some agreement on that and get past that. But we have many other things that I hear that we've got to address. I've heard you talk about environmental regulations. I've heard that from my farmers as well. Some that are actually in the process of doing an expansion and just the walls that they hit are things we have to address as a legislature. You know, we're in a global market. I just came back from a meeting in Quebec where we talked about milk pricing, and we talked more about New Zealand than we talked and what Russia is buying or not buying than anything else. So those are issues that we face too. But at the very least, we as legislators, and I don't think there's anybody on this panel who doesn't agree that we've got to do the best thing that we can for our farmers. And we've got to look at these things as they are interconnected. No one bill or one issue stands alone. There are a number of things that you're facing on a daily basis that we ought to be addressing as well. And I can tell you from my standpoint, I want to work with our members of our Senate committee, with Senator Vogel, with Secretary Redding, and others to start talking about some of these issues in the framework of where we are now and how do we get to a better place. I don't like that business about Michigan being ahead of us at all. But that's not really the important factor, is it? What I really want to see is that our farmers are free to be as profitable as they can be. And we have some things and work to do in Pennsylvania to make that happen. Thank you, Chairman Vogel.
Thank you, Senator Swank. Representative Cowser.
I'd like to thank everyone who testified here today and everyone who came to this hearing. There was a lot of very important information presented, and while we've talked about maybe some issues being more important than others, I would submit that all issues are important at some level, and some things are a start, some things are a continuation, but I think the information that's been presented here today is very valuable for both committees, and I look forward to working with all you folks to address issues in support of Pennsylvania dairy farmers. So thank you so much.
I likewise would like to thank everyone for coming today. To all our panelists as well, Secretary Redding, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here, and all our other panelists for being here to give us the information we have today. And thank everyone for coming. And at this time, this hearing is adjourned. Thank you.